think it captures the essence of what this book, Captivating, is all about. That the Lord finds us captivating, and He wants to captivate our hearts. And this book is especially for women, so it brings out things that are unique to us as women. And since we haven't had a chance to, since you haven't had a chance to read the chapter ahead of time, perhaps the best thing we could do today is to, we'll go through it together, the first chapter. Some parts I'll read to you, some parts I'll tell to you, just to save some time. Stacy opens this first chapter by telling a story about how her husband and her went canoeing with their boys. And they decided to go canoeing right towards dusk when it was getting dark. And they went down the river, and they were driving, and they took the canoe off their car and put it into the river, and they were going downstream. They were going to walk back up. They were going to take the boat out a ways down the river and carry it back up to their car. But what happened was, as they rode down, it was a beautiful, peaceful night. That was why she wanted to do it. It was like an impulse. She said, let's canoe down the river. And so they stopped, and they put the boat in, and they rode down. But when they got to the place where they were going to take the boat out and walk back up to the car, there was a big animal in their way. I'm trying to remember what it was. It was a moose or some huge animal. And so they weren't able to, a bull moose, yeah. And that was dangerous. And so they weren't able to take the canoe out at that point, because those kind of animals could jeopardize their lives. So that what they had to do was row back upstream, and that was dangerous because they were going against the currents, and they could have easily capsized, and now it was dark. And so it was going to take all the strength and attention that they both possessed. And Stacy explains how she felt essential to this episode. She felt needed. It was important that she row as hard as she could, and she used all her strength. And it was an adventure, but she felt alive. And she says on the bottom of page 3, it was glorious. We did it. He did. I did. We rose to the challenge, working together. The fact that it required all of me, that I was in it with my family and for my family, that I was surrounded by wild, shimmering beauty, and it was, well, kind of dangerous, made the time transcendent. I was no longer Stacy. I was Sacagawea, Indian princess of the West, a valiant and strong woman. A woman's journey. Then the time came when the risk it took to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. And that's a quote. I'm trying to remember when I first knew in my heart that I was no longer a girl. And then she relates some of the painful things that happened to her as a young girl in her family that embarrassed her and made her feel coming into womanhood almost shameful. And so when she got into college, she says at the bottom of 4, I joined the feminist movement in college, searching, as so many women did in the 70s, for a sense of self. I actually became director of the Women's Resource Center at a liberal state university in California. But no matter how much I asserted my strength and independence as a woman, hear me roar, my heart as a woman remained empty. To be told when you are young and searching that you can be anything is not helpful. It's too vast. It gives no direction. To be told when you are older that you can do anything a man can do isn't helpful either. I didn't want to be a man. What does it mean to be a woman? And as for romance, I stumbled through that mysterious terrain with only movies and music as a guide. Like so many women I know, I struggled alone through the mass of several broken hearts. My last year in college, I fell in love for real, and this young man truly loved me back. John and I dated for 2.5 years and then became engaged. As we made wedding plans, my mother gave me a rare bit of counsel, in this case, her marriage advice. It was twofold. First, love flies out the window when there's no pork chop on the table. And second, always keep your kitchen floor clean. It makes the whole house look better. I caught her drift, namely that my new position as wife centered in the kitchen, making the pork chops and cleaning up after them. I somehow believed that upon saying I do, I would be magically transformed into Betty Crocker. I imagined myself baking fresh bread, looking flushed and beautiful as I removed the steaming loaves from the oven. No matter that, I hadn't cooked but 5 meals in my entire life. I set about preparing dinners, breakfasts even, with determination and zeal. After 2 weeks of this, I lay on the couch despondent, announcing that I didn't know what was for dinner and that John was on his own. Besides, the kitchen floor wasn't dirty. Was dirty. I had failed. My story is like most women's stories. We've received all sorts of messages, but very little help in what it means to become a woman. As one young woman recently wrote us, I remember when I was 10 asking myself, as well as older females in my life, how a woman of God could actually be confident, scandalous, and beautiful, yet not portray herself as a feminist, Nazi, or an insecure, I need attention, emotional whore. How can I become a strong woman without becoming harsh? How can I be vulnerable without drowning myself in my sorrow? There seems to be a growing number of books on the masculine journey, rite of passage, initiations, and the like, many of them helpful, but there has been precious little wisdom offered on the path to becoming a woman. Oh, we know the expectations that have been laid upon us by our families, our churches, and our cultures. There are reams of materials on what you ought to do to be a good woman, but that is not the same thing as knowing what the journey toward becoming a woman involves, or even what the goal really should be. The church has not been a big help here. No, that's not quite honest enough. The church has been part of the problem. Its message to women has been primarily, you are here to serve. That's why God created you, to serve in the nursery, in the kitchen, on the various committees, in your home, in your community. Seriously now. Picture the women we hold up as models of femininity in the church. They are sweet, they are helpful, their hair is coiffed, they're busy, they are disciplined, they are composed, and they are tired. Think about the women you meet at church. They're trying to live up to some model of femininity. What do they teach you about being a woman? What are they saying to us through their lives? Like we said, you'd have to conclude that a godly woman is tired and guilty. We're all living in the shadow of that infamous icon, the Proverbs 31 woman, whose life is so busy, I wonder when does she have time for friendships, for taking walks, or reading good books? Her light never goes out at night? When does she have sex? Somehow, she has sanctified the shame most women live under, biblical proof that yet again we don't measure up. Is that supposed to be godly? That sense that you are a failure as a woman? I know unseen, unsought, and uncertain. I know I am not alone in this nagging sense of failing to measure up, a feeling of not being good enough as a woman. Every woman I've ever met feels it. Something deeper than just the sense of failing at what she does, an underlying gut feeling of failing at who she is. I am not enough and I am too much at the same time. Not pretty enough, not thin enough, not kind enough, not gracious enough, not disciplined enough, but too emotional, too needy, too sensitive, too strong, too opinionated, too messy. The result is shame, the universal companion of women. It haunts us, nipping at our heels, feeding on our deepest fear that we will end up abandoned and alone. After all, if we were better women, whatever that means, life wouldn't go so hard, right? We wouldn't have so many struggles. There would be less sorrow in our lives. Why is it so hard to create meaningful friendships and sustain them? Why do our days seem so unimportant, filled not with romance and adventure, but with duties and demands? We feel unseen even by those who are closest to us. We feel unsought, that no one has the passion or the courage to pursue us, to get past our messiness, to find the woman deep inside. And we feel uncertain what it means to be a woman, uncertain what it truly means to be feminine, uncertain if we are or ever will be. Aware of our deep failings, we pour contempt on our own hearts for wanting more. Oh, we long for intimacy and for adventure. We long to be the beauty of some great story. But the desires set deep in our hearts seem like a luxury granted only to those women who get their acts together. The message to the rest of us, whether from a driven culture or a driven church, is try harder. The heart of a woman. And in all the exhortations, we have missed the most important thing of all. We have missed the heart of a woman. And that is not a wise thing to do, for the scriptures tell us the heart is central. Above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. Above all else? Why? Because God knows that our heart is core to who we are. It is the source of all our creativity, our courage, and our convictions. It is the fountainhead of our faith, our hope, and of course our love. This wellspring of life within us is the very essence of our existence, the center of our being. Your heart as a woman is the most important thing about you. Think about it. God created you as a woman. God created man in his own image. Male and female, he created them. Genesis 1:27. Whatever it means to bear God's image, you do so as a woman, female. That's how and where you bear his image. Your feminine heart has been created with the greatest of all possible dignities as a reflection of God's own heart. You are a woman to your soul, to the very core of your being. And so the journey to discover what God meant when he created woman in his image, when he created you as his woman, that journey begins with your heart. Another way of saying this is that the journey begins with desire. Look at the games that little girls play, and if you can, remember what you dreamed of as a little girl. Look at the movies women love. Listen to your own heart and the hearts of the women you know. What is it that a woman wants? What does she dream of? Think again of women like Tamar, Ruth, Rahab. Not very churchy women, but women held up for esteem in the Bible. We think you'll find that every woman in her heart of hearts longs for three things: to be romanced, to play an irreplaceable role in a great adventure, and to unveil beauty. That's what makes a woman come alive. The first one, to be romanced. I will find you no matter how long it takes, no matter how far, I will find you. That's a quote from Nathaniel in Last of the Mohicans. One of my favorite games growing up was Kidnapped and Rescued. I know many little girls who played this or wish they had. To be the beauty abducted by the bad guys, fought for and rescued by a hero. Some version of this had a place in all our dreams, like Sleeping Beauty, like Cinderella, like Maid Marian, or like Cora in The Last of the Mohicans. I wanted to be the heroine and have my hero come for me. Why am I embarrassed to tell you this? I simply loved feeling wanted and fought for. The desire is set deep in the heart of every little girl and every woman. Yet most of us are ashamed of it. We downplay it. We pretend that it is less than it is. We are women of the 21st century, after all, strong, independent, and capable, thank you very much. And who is buying all those romance novels? Think about the movies you once loved and the movies you love now. Is there a movie for little girls that doesn't have a handsome prince coming to rescue his beloved? Sleeping Beauty, Snow White, The Little Mermaid. A little girl longs for romance, to be seen and desired, to be sought after and fought for. So the beast must win his beauty's heart in Beauty and the Beast. So in the gazebo scene, in The Sound of Music, the captain finally declares his love to Maria by moonlight and song, and then a kiss, and we sigh. Isn't something stirred in you when Edward finally returns to the end of Sense and Sensibility to proclaim his love for Eleanor? Then, you're not married, she asks, nearly holding her breath. No, he says. My heart is and always will be yours. Or how about when Friedrich returns for Jo at the end of Little Women, or the sunset scene at the bow of the Titanic? And we can't forget Braveheart, how William Wallace pursued the Miron with flowers and notes and invitations to ride. She is captured by his love, riding off bareback with him in the rain. Come now, wouldn't you want to ride through the Scottish Highlands with a man like Mel Gibson? When John and I began to date, I had just come out of a 3-year relationship that left me wounded, defensive, and gun-shy. John and I had been friends for years, but we never seemed to connect in the romance department. I would like him and he would want to remain just friends. He would feel more for me and I would not for him. You get the picture. Until one autumn after I had become a Christian and I was desperately seeking our spiritual journeys and the desires of our hearts finally met. John wrote me letters, lots of letters, each one filled with his love for God and his passion for me, his desire for me. He spent hours carving a beautiful heart out of manzanita wood, then attached it to a delicate chain and surprised me with it. I still cherish the necklace. I came out to my car after my waitressing shift ended to find his poetry underneath my windshield. Verses written for me, to me. He loved me. He saw me and knew me and pursued me. I loved being romanced. When we were young, we wanted to be precious to someone, especially Daddy. As we grow older, the desire matures into a longing to be pursued, desired, wanted as a woman. Why am I so embarrassed by the depth of my desire for this? Asked a young friend just the other day. We were talking about her life as a single woman and how she loves her work, but would much rather be married. I don't want to hang my life on it, but still I yearn. Of course, you're a woman. Now, being romanced isn't all that a woman wants, and John and I are certainly not saying that a woman ought to derive the meaning of her existence from whether or not she is being or has been romanced by a man. But don't you see that you want this? To be desired, to be pursued by one who loves you, to be someone's priority? Most of our addictions as women flare up when we feel that we are not loved or sought after. At some core place, maybe deep within, perhaps hidden or buried in her heart, every woman wants to be seen, wanted, and pursued. We want to be romanced. An irreplaceable role in a great adventure. This is the second thing. The first thing is to be romanced, and the second thing is to play an irreplaceable role in a great adventure. When I was a little girl, I used to love World War II movies. I imagined myself in them, being in them. I dreamed of growing up, braiding my hair, and then tucking it up under my helmet. I planned to disguise my gender so that I could join in. I sensed that the men in these movies were part of something heroic, valiant, and worthy. I longed to be a part of it too. In the depths of my soul, I longed to be a part of something large and good, something that required all of me, something dangerous and worth dying for. There is something fierce in the heart of a woman. Simply insult her children, her man, or her best friend, and you'll get a taste of it. A woman is a warrior too, but she is meant to be a warrior in a uniquely feminine way. Sometime before the sorrows of life did their best to kill it in us, most young women wanted to be a part of something grand, something important. Before doubt and accusation take hold, most little girls sense that they have a vital role to play. They want to believe there is something in them that is needed and needed desperately. Think of Sarah from Sarah Plain and Tall. A man and his young children need her. Their world is not right until she becomes a part of it. She brings her courage and her creativity to the West and helps to tame it. We are awed by the nurses in Pearl Harbor, how in the midst of a horrifying assault, they bring their courage and strength to rescue the lives of hundreds of men. The women in the Lord of the Rings trilogy are valiant and beautiful. Women like Arwen, Galadriel, and Eowyn changed the fate of Middle-earth. And what about women like Esther and Mary and Ruth? They were biblical characters who had irreplaceable roles in a great story, not safe and nice women, not merely sweet, but passionate and powerful women who were beautiful as warriors. Why do I remember loving the story of my canoeing in the dark beauty of the Tetons so much? Because I was needed. I was needed. Not only was I needed, but like Arwen, I was irreplaceable. No one else in that canoe could have done what I did. Women love adventures of all sorts, whether it be the adventures of horses, most girls go through a horse stage, or whitewater rafting, going to a foreign country, performing on stage, having children, starting a business, or diving ever more deeply into the heart of God. We were made to be a part of a great adventure, an adventure that is shared. We do not want the adventure merely for adventure's sake, but for what it requires of us for others. We don't want to be alone in it. We want to be in it with others. Sometimes the idea of living as a hermit appeals to all of us. No demands, no needs, no pain, no disappointments, but that is because we have been hurt or are worn out.
In our heart of hearts, that place where we are most ourselves, we don't want to run away for very long. Our lives were meant to be lived with others. As echoes of the Trinity, we remember something. Made in the image of a perfect relationship, we are relational to the core of our beings and filled with a desire for transcendent purpose. We long to be an irreplaceable part of a shared adventure. And now this is the third part. The third thing is that as women, we have beauty to unveil. And she uses the verse from Psalm 45:11, which we know well. The king is enthralled by your beauty. The king's daughter is all glorious within. Lovely little 6-year-old Lacey was visiting our ministry outpost the other day, going from office to office, swinging on the door frame and asking with a smile, "Would you like to hear my song?" Her face kissed by the sun with charming freckles, 2 front teeth missing and her eyes dancing with merriment. Who could refuse her? She didn't really care if she was an interruption. I doubt the thought crossed her mind. She sang her newly made-up song about puppies and kitties, fully expecting to be delighted in, then skipped down the hall to grace the occupant of the next office. She was like a ray of summer sun, or better, a garden fairy, flitting from office to office. She was a little girl in her glory, unashamed in her desire to delight and be delighted in. It's why little girls play dress-up. Little boys play dress-up too, but in a different way. Our sons were cowboys for years, or army men, or Jedi knights, but they never once dressed up as bridegrooms, fairies, or butterflies. Little boys do not paint their toenails. They do not beg to get their ears pierced. Some teenage boys do, but that is another story. Little boys don't play dress-up with mommy's jewelry and high heels. They don't sit for hours and brush each other's hair. Remember twirling skirts? Most little girls go through a season when they will not wear anything if it does not twirl, and if it sparkles, so much the better. Hours and hours of endless play result from giving little girls a box filled with hats, scarves, necklaces, and clothes. Dime store beads are priceless jewels. Hand-me-down pumps are glass slippers. Grandma's nightie a ballroom gown. Once dressed, they dance around the house or preen in front of a mirror. Their young hearts intuitively want to know they are lovely. Some will ask with words, "Am I lovely?" Others will simply ask with their eyes. Verbal or not, whether wearing a shimmery dress or covered in mud, all little girls want to know, as a young songwriter recently wrote, "I want to be beautiful and make you stand in awe. Look inside my heart and be amazed. I want to hear you say, who I am is quite enough. I just want to be worthy of love and beautiful." Bethany Dillon. Last summer, John and I attended a ball at the beautiful historic Broadmere Hotel. It was a stunning affair, black tie, candlelight, dinner, dancing, you name it. The courtyard where the hors d'oeuvres were served was filled with fresh flowers, flowing fountains, and the music of a gifted pianist. It was an evening long planned for weeks, no, months ahead of the affair. I, like every other woman who attended, asked the all-important question, what will I wear? As the special night drew closer, I also wondered if it was possible to lose 20 pounds in 7 days. The evening turned out to be glorious. The weather was perfect, every detail attended to and lovely. But the highlight by far was the women. Above the sound of the splashing water from the fountains, even above the music that floated through the air, was the sound of delighted exclamations. "You look beautiful. You are gorgeous. What an amazing dress. How lovely you are." We were delighting in each other's beauty and enjoying our own. We were playing dress up for real and loving it. These women were normal women, women just like you and me, women you would run into at the bank or the grocery store or the office, women whose battles against acne have left their faces marked and their souls scarred, women whose struggle with their weight has been the bane of their lives, women who always felt their hair was too thin, too thick, too straight, or too curly. Ordinary women, if there is such a thing. But women who, at least for a few hours this night, took the risk of revealing their beauty. Perhaps better, whose beauty was unveiled. Think of your wedding day or the wedding day you dream of. How important is your dress as a bride? Would you just grab the first thing in your closet, throw on any old thing? A friend of ours is getting married in 6 months. Now this young woman has seen her share of boys and heartbreaks. Her tale of beauty has many hurts to it, But as she told us about trying on wedding dresses and finding just the right dress, the weariness faded away and she was radiant. I felt like a princess, she said almost shyly. Isn't that what you dreamed of? One little girl who was being raised in a home where her feminine heart is welcomed told her mother about a wonderful dream she had. And this is a quote. My daughter Emma, nearly 6 years old, came to me all aglow this morning. She lay at my feet on my bed, all stretched out as if she hadn't a care in the world. Mommy, she said, I had a wonderful dream last night. What was it about? I asked. I was a queen, she answered, and as she did, her cheeks blushed pink. Really? I replied. What happened in your dream? I was wearing a long, beautiful dress, she said, with hands gesturing downward flowing. Was there anything on your head? I wondered aloud. Yes, a crown. Why was that such a wonderful dream? I just love feeling that way. What way? And with a sigh, she spoke one word, beauty. The desire to be beautiful is an ageless longing. My friend Lily is in her mid-80s, and as she descended the stairs of her home one Christmas season, I was captured by her beauty. She was wearing a green corduroy jumper with a white turtleneck that had little candy canes all over it. Lily, you look lovely. Her face lit up, wrinkles and age spots disappearing as she put her hands out at her sides like a ballerina and did a delightful little twirl. She was no longer 80. She was ageless. God has set eternity in our hearts. The longing to be beautiful is set there as well. Now, as we know that the desire to be beautiful has caused many women untold grief, how many diets have you been on? Countless tears have been shed and hearts broken in its pursuit. As Janice Ian sang, I learned the truth at 17 that love has meant for beauty queens and high school girls with clear-skinned smiles. Beauty has been extolled and worshipped and kept just out of reach for most of us. Do you like having your picture taken? Do you like seeing those pictures later? How do you feel when people ask you your age? This issue of beauty runs deep. For others, beauty has been shamed, used, and abused. Some of you have learned that possessing beauty can be dangerous, and yet this is just astounding. In spite of all the pain and distress that beauty has caused us as women, the desire remains. During the midst of a talk I gave on the heart of a woman last year, one of the women in the audience leaned over to a friend and said, I don't know what this whole thing is about, twirling skirts and all. The words had barely left her mouth when she burst into tears and had to leave the room. Little did she know how deep the desire ran and how much pain it had caused. Many of us have hardened our hearts to this desire, the desire to be the beauty. We too have been hurt so deeply in this area that we no longer identify with, perhaps even resent the longing, but it's there. And it's not just the desire for an outward beauty, but more a desire to be captivating in the depths of who you are. Cinderella is beautiful, yes, but she is also good. Her outward beauty would be hollow if it were not for the beauty of her heart. That's why we love her. In The Sound of Music, the Countess has Maria beat in the looks department, and they both know it. But Maria has a rare and beautiful depth of spirit. She has the capacity to love snowflakes on kittens and mean-spirited children. She sees the handiwork of God in music and laughter and climbing trees. Her soul is alive, and we are drawn to her. Ruth may have been a lovely, strong woman, but it is to her unrelenting courage and vulnerability and faith in God that Boaz is drawn. Esther is the most beautiful woman in the land, but it is her bravery and her cunning, good heart that moves the king to spare her people. This isn't about dresses and makeup. Beauty is so important that we'll come back to it again and again in this book. For now, don't you recognize that a woman yearns to be seen, to be thought of as captivating? We desire to possess a beauty that is worth pursuing, worth fighting for, a beauty that is core to who we truly are. We want beauty that can be seen, beauty that can be felt, beauty that affects others, a beauty all our own to unveil. And then she ends with this thought, the heart of man. And John, her husband, writes this part. As I, John, here described in Wild at Heart, there are 3 core desires in the heart of every man as well. If you haven't read that book, you really should. It will open your eyes to the world of men. But they are uniquely masculine. For starters, every man wants a battle to fight. It's the whole thing with boys and weapons. Over the years, our house has become an arsenal. Pirate swords, Indian knives, lightsabers, six-shooters, paintball markers, airsoft guns. That name had to have been invented for moms. You name it. Our boys wrestled and hit and slammed one another up against the walls, and that is how they showed affection. And look at the movies men love. Braveheart, Gladiator, Top Gun, High Noon, Saving Private Ryan. Men are made for battle. And ladies, don't you love the heroes of those movies? You might not want to fight in a war, but don't you long for a man who will fight for you? To have Daniel Day-Lewis look you in the eyes and say, no matter how long it takes, no matter how far, I will find you. Women don't fear a man's strength if he is a good man. In fact, passivity might make a man safe, but it has done untold damage to women in the long run. It certainly did to Eve. More on that later. Men also long for adventure. Boys love to climb and jump and see how fast they can ride their bikes with no hands. Just look in your garage, all the gear and go-karts and motorcycles and ropes and boats and stuff. This isn't about boys and their toys. Adventure is a deeply spiritual longing in the heart of every man. Adventure requires something of us, puts us to the test. Though we may fear the test, at the same time we yearn to be tested to discover that we have what it takes. Finally, every man longs for a beauty to rescue. He really does. Where would Robin Hood be without Marion, or King Arthur without Guinevere? Lonely men fighting lonely battles. You see, it's not just that a man needs a battle to fight. He needs someone to fight for. There is nothing that inspires a man to courage so much as the woman he loves. Most of the darling and, sometimes ridiculous things young men do are to impress the girls. Men go to war carrying photos of their sweethearts in their wallets. That is a metaphor of this deep longing to fight for the beauty. This is not to say that a woman is a helpless creature who can't live her life without a man. I'm saying that men long to offer their strength on behalf of a woman. Now, can you see how the desires of a man's heart and the desire of a woman's heart were at least meant to fit beautifully together? A woman in the presence of a good man, a real man, loves being a woman. His strength allows her feminine heart to flourish. His pursuit draws out her beauty. And a man in the presence of a real woman loves being a man. Her beauty arouses him to play the man. It draws out his strength. She inspires him to be a hero. Would that we all were so fortunate. By way of the heart, the longings God has written deep in your hearts are telling you something essential about what it means to be a woman and the life He meant for you to live. Now we know many of those desires have gone unmet or been assaulted or simply so long neglected that most women end up living two lives. On the surface, we are busy and efficient, professional even. We are getting by. On the inside, women lose themselves in a fantasy world or in cheap novels, or we give ourselves over to food or some other addiction to numb the ache of our hearts. But your heart is still there, crying out to be set free, to find the life your desires tell you of. You can find that life if you are willing to embark on a great adventure. That is what we are inviting you to. Not to learn one more set of standards you fail to meet. Not toward a new set of rules to live by and things you ought to do. Something far, far better, a journey of the heart. A journey toward the restoration and release of the woman you always longed to be. This book is not about what you ought to do or who you ought to be. It's about discovering who you already are as a woman who at her core was made for romance, made to play an irreplaceable role in a shared adventure, and who really does possess a beauty all her own to unveil. The woman God had in mind when He made Eve and when He made you, glorious, powerful, and captivating.